Getting a liberal arts film degree is a lot like going to laser tag as a kid. You get there, you shoot a few things with your friends, and at the end they give you a flimsy piece of paper and send you back home to live with your parents. But when you're not watching Birth of a Nation for the 4th time, there's probably one anecdote you'll come across more than any other. It has to do with a film that is so disturbing, so mentally scarring that Okay, so for the uninitiated, here's how the story goes. Once upon a time, that time being 1896, a group of naive, rubish filmgoers attended a screening of this film, The Arrival of the Train, by pioneering filmmakers the Lumière Brothers. The movie is a whopping 50 seconds long and shows, big shocker, a train arriving. According to the story, those simpletons in the audience thought the train was real and headed straight for them, so they began to panic and jump from their seats, and chaos ensued. This anecdote has been repeated over and over again for a century, not only by the public, but also by legit historians and scholars. In fact, one of the most important film historians, Georges Sadoul, pictured here smizing like the bona fide hunk he was, shared this story in his legendary film history series, writing, "In l'arrivée d'un train, the locomotive, coming from the background of the screen, rushed toward the spectators, who jumped up in shock as they feared getting run over." Look, I can see the appeal of this story. It's cute, and it shows us how the moving image is so powerful that, to the untrained eye, we can mistake image for reality. Unless, of course, that's all a lie. This legend is not only untrue, but actively dangerous. Hey, I'm Teddy, and today I'm going to talk about cinema's founding myth. Why it didn't happen the way you think it did, how it came to become so popular, and why it's actually toxic for society. Along the way, I'll chat with Dr. Janet Murray about how the train legend is part of a bigger legacy of myths about new media that spans from ancient Greek poetry to modern-day virtual reality simulations. Before we get started, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel because I asked you to. And that's what friends do. Okay, let's think about it for just a second. Let's put ourselves in the audience's shoes. Yes, the image is moving, and that's new and cool and all, but it's still in black and white. It doesn't look like the real world. Not to mention that it was shown on these old projectors, so the image would be flickering a whole lot. And lest you forget, there was literally no sound either. Were people really that dumb, or are we missing something here? To find the answer, we need to look at the facts. So, was there any proof of this mythical screening where people thought the train was coming right at them? Well, according to historians and scholars, not really. I mean, there are a few anecdotes, but there are no real articles or police records or things outside of marketing materials. So how did people actually react to this movie when it came out? Well, to find that out, we have to look at the writings of journalists and other filmgoers and see how they wrote about the experience. So let's go check the Rotten Tomatoes score, shall we? The reviews generally say two kinds of things. First, they do admit that it is a pretty astonishing and lifelike experience. Félix Regnault wrote, "The locomotive appears small at first, then immense, as if it were going to crush the audience." And Russian journalist Maxim Gorky was even more graphic. "A train appears on the screen. It speeds right at you. Watch out. It seems as though it will plunge into the darkness where you sit, turning you into a ripped sack full of lacerated flesh and splintered bones." Okay. So basically, yeah, people were actually astonished when these movies came out. Historians agree that articles like this were probably a big origin for this whole train myth. But what's interesting is that if you read just a few lines further, then they refute the biggest part of this whole myth. Regnault continued to say, "Have we reached perfection? Far from it. The enlarged film material shows its flaws. Every now and then, the glaring spots shock the eye." And Gorky calls it a train of shadows, writing, "Noiselessly, the locomotive disappears beyond the edge of the screen. The train comes to a stop, and gray figures silently emerge from the cars." Basically, it was lifelike in comparison to a still photo, but it wasn't nearly convincing enough to make people actually think that a train was coming at them. These were not stupid filmgoers who mistook image for reality. Audiences were shocked, yes, but they knew exactly what was happening. They know it's not reality, and that's what's drawing them in. We can see a close link between the development of movies and the popularity of another budding form of entertainment at the time, theme parks. We enjoy roller coasters because it gives us the illusion that we're about to run into the ground at 100 miles per hour, but not because we think we actually will. Early movies didn't focus on plot or character development. Obviously, they're 50 seconds long. Instead, they were interesting to audiences because they showed the illusion of movement. Dr. Tom Gunning calls this type of movie the cinema of attractions. We can understand early cinema as being in the same lineage as the magic show. In the same way that the magician creates illusions to make the impossible look real, the first movies amazed audiences because they showed the illusion of motion. But you don't see anyone at a magic show dialing 911 and being like, oh my God, he's sawing a woman in half. No, we have a suspension of disbelief. We are excited by the thrill of witnessing the impossible while knowing that we're still in reality. These myths about the train probably got so popular because of the intense marketing behind these movies. They would sell merch with a panicking audience that says, you'd think it was real. And at the theater, they'd often start these projections reassuring people that they weren't gonna get hurt. In one New York publicity stunt, they even put some paramedics and a stretcher at the entrance to help protect people. Yes, these stunts were to build hype, but it was this very framing that made it clear to audiences that this was all an illusion, that it wasn't in reality. So why would I want to ruin this harmless, cute little story? Well, first of all, I hate things like joy and wonder. Second, this story might not be as harmless as you think. This legend is often called cinema's founding myth because it supposedly says something about the essence of cinema, that it is so powerful that we lose ourselves to it. We become defenseless to the magic of the image. Or at least certain people do. Not the sophisticated viewer like you and I, but the other. And by that I mean the other. If you spend approximately 2 seconds looking at these images of people who are supposedly scared by this train movie, you start to notice that most fit into a certain type, the country bumpkin. This became its own early movie trope in the form of characters like Uncle Josh, the country hick who comes to the big city and is confused by everything. He would walk up to the movie screen and think it was real, and the whole plot is me no understand movie. Some film scholars suggest that this very myth was used to create the first identity of the film goer or the film audience, making people comfortable with a new medium, but doing it through an us versus them dichotomy. Us, the sophisticated, thrilled film goers who really get what's going on, versus them, the unsophisticated, primitive, poor people who are out of the loop. It's probably no coincidence that words like rube and hayseed, which are derogatory terms for country folk, were coined in the 1890s during the same decade. Any myth comes at the expense of somebody's truth. It's just that you choose whose truth to privilege. But there's an even deeper layer to this. It doesn't just stop at a movie about a train. These kinds of fantasies crop up with nearly every new medium.
Plato was very frightened that the poets had this ability to create delusion in people, that people would listen to a story and they would think it was real because it was a very strong immersive experience. And then if you think about Don Quixote is written at a time when people are starting to read silently, be alone in a room with all these things that didn't really happen, you'll go mad. Or the War of the Worlds myth about radio. It's another one that didn't actually happen. People knew it was just a drama.
Throughout history, over and over again, we keep telling ourselves this same old story, that these new technologies, whatever they are going to take away our ability to distinguish between reality and fantasy. Nowadays, we don't have a magical train film hypnotizing audiences into thinking it's real, but we do have myths surrounding technologies like artificial intelligence and, what I want to talk about, virtual reality.
AI and virtual reality are both subject to the same kind of magical thinking. So you know how Arthur C. Clarke said that any technology that is sufficiently advanced cannot be distinguished from magic, and technologists love to quote that. But it's also the case that if you have too much faith in technology, then any kind of magical thinking cannot be distinguished from actual technology. And that is what is happening rampant right now with AI and with virtual reality.
Proponents of virtual reality often claim that VR will become indistinguishable from reality. The Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab claimed that VR allows users to vividly and viscerally experience any situation as if it were happening to them from any perspective. Any situation, except for like eating a meal or wrestling a bear. Even when you're in a convincing VR experience, once your hand hits the chair or you try to crouch down and your avatar won't let you, you realize the limitations of the medium. The real danger comes when people use this fantasy of replacing the material world with virtual reality to ignore real world problems.
To me, the really frightening approach is not the people who get overhyped and the people who get overscared, but this philosophical-ish cool about it. Like, well, we know that consciousness is just a delusion anyway. So now we're in this very interesting state where we will never know what's real, but of course we can live with that. And wouldn't it be enticing? Because then we could remove ourselves from the real world and maybe we could generate other realities. It's a real failure of the moral imagination to be looking at that world as if it would be an improvement in some way, if we could just float into the matrix.
Techno elites love to imagine up this future where we upload our consciousness to the global network and we're just brains in vats. But it's irresponsible because we're ignoring real world suffering. And this dream could never happen. It's a futile dream. The only reason we buy into VR in the first place is because we know that it's not real.
Immersion is not something that magically happens because we invent a technology that has more pixels. It's something that it's part of a collective process of inventing a medium. The thing that makes it work is that we always know that it isn't real, and we've surrendered to it on those terms. If you look at people doing a tightrope walk in virtual reality, they'll kneel down and touch the floor, and then they'll go back to doing it. They want to know where the boundary of the experience is. And then they can think, oh my God, I feel like I'm really there. But they only feel like they're really there because they know they're not there.
These fantastical visions for the future always play on the idea that, well, if this technology feels immersive now, then imagine in 10 years we're going to be completely overtaken by the immersion. But it doesn't happen. It didn't happen with the ancient Greek poetry, it didn't happen with the arrival of the train, and it's not going to happen with VR or AI.
Kurzweil originally predicted 2020 as the year of the singularity, where we can emerge with the machine. And now he's saying 2040. It's a standing joke that it's 10 years away, but it's always 10 years away. I think that we always have this fear, and I think that the answer to it is that we develop media conventions that allow people to distinguish between the fantasy and the real.
Gunning's original article explaining the myth of the train came out over 30 years ago, and people still buy into it just as much as they did back then. So I don't expect a 10-minute video essay by a B-rate YouTuber to be the solution to this, especially if you don't like and subscribe. But what I am hoping is that in this world where a new technology pops up every year, that you have a critical eye and that you look at these technologies not with endless wonder and skeptical fear, but with a realistic outlook. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, the best thing you can do is to share this video with a friend who you think might like it. That would help the channel immensely. And a big shout out to my supporters on Patreon who send me monthly donations, and it really helps keep the quality of these videos as high as I can make them. And if you like this video and want to learn about a different myth through history, then I have a video called How Motherhood Was Invented, which I filmed with my own mom, and I think is pretty interesting. So I'll see you over there.